Welcome on in, ladies, gentlemen, fellas. Hey, yo, fellas. Welcome into the Week 9 That One Dude, a leverage play that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a good amount of leverage plays today. 5 leverage plays, guys that are not being as highly owned for one reason or another. They haven't been producing as much. They're coming off of the bye or the injury. It's not as obvious of a nice game environment, but because of leverage, the only thing that fucking matters, and that's obviously being a little tongue-in-cheek, the most important thing that matters in daily fantasy sports and winning GPPs is leverage. How much of a percentage chance does somebody have at actually being in a winning lineup versus what is the field doing with their ownership? Oh, the field's not owning this guy and he has a pretty good chance? There you go. There's my leverage play. Oh, the field's over owning this guy even though his chance is just that much? All right, well, there's my fade play. That's what we're finding here. We're finding the leverage plays for you. And in this specific video, a tight end, a running back, and 3 wide receivers on this 12-game slate. It might be an 11-game slate, actually. I don't even know at this point. The weeks go by so long. They're aging me here. My lovely brown hair is staying brown. It's not going gray because we're Italians and we got thick fucking hair. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's slide into it. Subscribe button right there. I appreciate it. Yeah, there's sunflowers on my shirt. Yeah, there's a rotten pumpkin behind me. It's what it is. The first player we're going to talk about today is a wide receiver who I think is a fantastico run back option this week. He is $5,000. I have him projected for 12.8 fantasy points. Let's call it 13 at 5% current ownership. The second-year player out of Alabama, JEUDY. Now, JEUDY this year has only ran 44 routes. Just 44 routes run, but he has seen 11 targets, a 25% target rate from Teddy Bridgewater. That's pretty solid. He's probably not going to see Trevon Diggs. And by the way, Trevon Diggs for the Cowboys, who is potentially the defensive player of the year because of all these interceptions, the pick sixes, he's also given up a lot of yardage, right? He is that, we'll see, the Marcus Peters early career, Aqib Talib. Hopefully not Josh Norman's early career with the Panthers as a rookie. I know this is a second-year player that we're talking about, but he's going to bite. He's going to get beat. I assume he goes over to Courtland Sutton for a lot of this. I don't know if it'll be a shadow matchup, but either way, JEUDY's going to have the easier matchup for most of the day, and he'll move into the slot a good amount as Tim Patrick and Sutton on the outside, JEUDY in the slot where his route running excellence dominated a ton of the time over in Alabama and last year when he was allowed to play there before injuries happened. So now you have JEUDY as an underdog in his team in this game. They'll be playing from behind, and I'm expecting Teddy Bridgewater to go out there and throw for higher than his average, more than 35 attempts per game. So that 25% target rate this year has led to 10 catches. 10 catches on 44 routes is solid production, and that's a guy coming back and only playing last week 70% of the snaps when he can easily get back up, especially if he can take some of the outside reps to 80%, 85% of the snaps. And that's when you see the 20 routes run start to go to, especially if they play from behind, 30 routes run, right? Start seeing 32, 34, 35 routes run, and now he's getting into those 8 to 9 target games. So just $5,000 Rooskies. I mean, this is a nice spot overall, especially in your runbacks, but it's also a nice one-off spot. Like with Odell Beckham Jr., as of this recording on Friday, they're expecting to cut him as the report. He's not on the team. With him missing, $5,100 Jarvis Landry is going to soak up all of the ownership here. And maybe rightfully so as a one-off option, but let's look at this right now. Look at my tweet. I have Jarvis Landry, who's $100 more, so he's actually more expensive, not by much, but more expensive than JEUDY this week. I have Landry projected for 13.5 points, about a half a fantasy point more than JEUDY. And what you're going to be getting here is 10% ownership on Landry, just 5% on JEUDY. I mean, I think I could personally say JEUDY has currently more talent, more upside, all that type of stuff. I think he probably even has a better quarterback at this situation. He's just dealing with Courtland Sutton, whereas you're going to be having on the opposite side of that one, Landry dealing with Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashad Higgins, that type of stuff, but with a quarterback who is banged up, where they want to run the ball. So you're getting Landry coming in right now with twice the ownership as JEUDY. That is a mistake. That is where the first leverage that I see is great. And if you're talking about stacking Dak with Amari, stacking Dak with CeeDee Lamb and Amari, whatever you're doing in your Dallas stacks, and you want to run it back somewhere, yeah, there's Sutton. Yeah, there's Alberto, who's just a punt tight end this week. If you wanted a five-man game stack it, Alberto and JEUDY, cheap right there. You got 2 players on a run back for $7,600 total. That's pretty damn good. We could also even compare it to Hunter Renfrow, who I currently have projected right now for 14.8 points. He's cheaper, 4,800. He's 15% on. So Hunter Renfrow is the better play on paper here, but I would say JEUDY has more upside, especially downfield. And also Hunter Renfrow only projected for 2 more points than JEUDY, coming in with 10% more ownership. That's where you start to weigh the game of, is this worth it? When you're trying to find different pieces in your lineup, if you have the extra $200 to get to JEUDY and you have a chalky lineup, but you don't think that you're that different in a a large field tournament, that's where you just go JEUDY over Renfro, and look at that, you just save 10% ownership. So there's the first fella on the slate. And Jerry JEUDY, there's a couple of props out there on Prize Picks. I currently have him for about 13 fantasy points, so the over 12 fantasy points number, I lean that one. I took the over 53.5, as you can see on the screen right now. Over 53.5 receiving yards on Prize Picks. This number is like 57.5, I think, on Underdog, so be sure to shop those lines. If you want to use the code SAL, simple as this. Use the code SAL, S-A-L. Your first bet is matched up to $100 for free. So you get a free bet after that up to $100. Use the code SAL. Take these props, take whichever ones you want. You should be putting your money here while this limited time offer lasts. Free bet up to $100 bills. Y'all. Let's now talk to you about a running back this week. A running back that I think looks like a pretty solid play still. Aaron Rodgers is not going to play, but I think Aaron Jones at $7,200 will have for 18 fantasy points at 6% projected ownership. I mean, before the Aaron Rodgers news, on my very early ownership runs, Aaron Jones was coming in as like one of the highest on running backs, which makes sense, right? Best in game environment. He's going to come in as a 1-point underdog, 1-point favorite, depending on the book, so it's a nice environment. Now he's an 8.5-point underdog. The team total goes from 27 points to 20 points, so it's nowhere near as good of a game environment as you're an underdog now, but still a good matchup. You should get some receiving game work with Jordan Love checking down some in this game. We saw him do that in very limited preseason action to the running backs, to Kylan Hill, who's now injured, but played in the preseason for the Packers. So what you're getting is, yeah, not a good team total, 20 implied. Big underdog, not good. But what that is going to do is give you some leverage here because it's still a matchup against the number 32 run defense of the Chiefs. You were still getting 18 opportunities from Aaron Jones per game. And I mean, if you're just looking at what Aaron Jones has done this year, and of course, Aaron Rodgers is in for all of these games, so it's going to be somewhat of a skewed sample, but he has games of 42 points, 18, 21, and 24 points. So, I mean, he's getting you there on massive days in about half of those games. And then some of the other games that we didn't talk about, you're getting 11 points, you're getting 18 points. So there's a lot of good games in there. I mean, the only time that he's really shit the bed was week 1 when he had 4.2, and then against the Bears when he had like 9 fantasy points. So this is a good player in Aaron Jones who gets there more often than not. Even if he's not having a standout game, he's still getting 17 points just because he's so active in the receiving game, so active in the red zone right now, second in the NFL in red zone touches. But of course, Jordan Love is going to tank this offense a lot compared to Aaron Rodgers, even if it's not from how much passing yards he goes for, just kind of keeping things in flow, knowing when to check out of certain reads, right? It's not going to get as much opportunity and upside for all the players on this offense, but that's going to be reflected in the ownership here. Like, I still have a good projection on Aaron Jones. We should expect him to try and establish the running game early in this one, and he's going to have the ability to, especially if David Bakhtiari for the Packers returns an even better advantage versus this defensive front for KC. It's just going to be a great matchup for the Packers offensive line-wise. But let's look at maybe my favorite running back play on the week in Ezekiel Elliott, who, again, I like Ezekiel Elliott, but if you're looking in your lineup, don't play all these guys in the same lineup. If you're looking for a leverage play and you need one in the running back position, Aaron Jones at 6% owned, that 18 fantasy point projection. Look at my tweet here. I have Ezekiel Elliott for 18.2 points at $7,000, so basically the same play, but Ezekiel Elliott 16% owned. He also has a good matchup against Denver's defensive line, which is nowhere near as good, and now lost Von Miller. So yeah, Zeke also has a good matchup. In that game, he's going to be a 9-point favorite with a 30 implied total, so the game environment is way better than Aaron Jones. I get that, right? On paper, everything. And that's why he's 16% owned. But at the end of the day, his price and projection is basically virtually the same as Aaron Jones, and he's going to be 10% higher owned, so give or take. So you can look at that, and it looks a lot better. You can even look at Eckler, who's $700 more. Eckler, I'm projecting out for 19.5 points, so about a 1.5 more. He's 16% owned. So right now, Aaron Jones is, if you're looking for running backs, if you're not trying to pay down for some value now, like Devontae Booker, if Saquon's out, if you're looking for running backs in that upper range, right, you're not going to McCaffrey, right, sandwiched in between Zeke and Eckler, who are both really good plays still, right? If you don't worry about ownership in your total lineup, and you don't need to, you got a different wide receiver with JEUDY or somebody else already, right sandwich in between there is Aaron Jones, who looks pretty damn good still this week, especially factoring in his matchup. I currently have Aaron Jones. There's 2 numbers out there, 16.5 fantasy points. That's going to be probably touchdown reliant on a team that's implied to score just 3 touchdowns. So over 16.5, I haven't taken that. I lean that on Prize Picks. I like the over 29.5 receiving yards. That number is also big. Like, I currently only have him in the low 30s, but I do expect him to be the second leading receiver on this team. I do expect him to be them to scheme open a couple of screen plays to an Aaron Jones, a couple of quick passes to an Aaron Jones to help Jordan Love get going, especially on their first scripted maybe 10 or 15 plays in this game for Jordan Love. So the over 29.5 on Prize Picks. Use the code SAL for that free bet up to $100 Wooskies, and there you go. Now let's slide into 2 more players. We got 2 receivers and a tight end for you beautiful people. We'll be live tomorrow for the last show live. In the mornings, we do a Patreon show for all the Patreon community members with everything. We talk about everything there in terms of my exposures, where I'm going with top stacks, where I'm reading the slate, where the leverage plays are, my exposures at every single position and all that type of stuff. If you're interested in knowing exactly where I'm going for every single slate, I'm on my 150 max builds, 20 max, get an idea of my single entry and 3 max. Yep, that's where you can go on Patreon. Not only that, but obviously projections, rankings, ownership, the optimizer now, which is massive, not only for one sport, but all the sports I cover: NBA, MMA, PGA, MLB's over, Discord, a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's the best deal you're going to find out there in the DFS space because I'm a company of one here, and we don't got to charge crazy prices for it and pay a bunch of employees and contractors. Keep that overhead low, which allows me to have less stress and allows you to get a lower buy-in. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a beautiful fucking thing, the company of one. Beautiful thing. So, next up, wide receiver. I love this man this week. Oh, and if you're talking about Aaron Jones versus this guy for a leverage play, it's a different position if you're talking about for the flex. But give me all day long Justin Jefferson. $7,500 Justin Jefferson. I think if we're talking about the overall slate this week, he is going to be my favorite leverage play. Because, man, oh man, this man has the Devontae Adams ceiling, the Tyreek ceiling, the 30 to 40 point ceiling out there, right? He has that ability, and he's only 5% owned. I have him for 17.4 fantasy points. He's only 5% owned. I mean, this guy's route running is second only to Devontae Adams in the NFL, and the ownership is going to be lower because there's guys around him who have been playing better. CeeDee Lamb has been playing better coming off of the exact same game where they faced the Vikings in prime time, and Justin Jefferson only had 2 catches in that game. 1 catch after the first drive. He had 2 catches for 27 yards. But you look before that. You take off the blinders and you look what he was doing before that. He had 19 fantasy points, 27, or actually 30 fantasy points with the bonus, 20 fantasy points, 22 fantasy points, and 14 fantasy points. Like before that last game of 4 points, this guy's floor was basically 14 points. And 14 points is not what you want at $7,500. But if that's the worst case scenario, 90% of the time, we'll take that when his average fantasy points this year is hovering around 20 at this point. I mean, he went a month straight with 19 or more fantasy points, topping out at over 30 in there. Justin Jefferson is elite. He's fantastic. We all know that. And now he's going to be put into a spot where they have a nice team total. They have a nice 22 implied team total in this situation, and they're underdogs, so they're going to throw. This is the Kirk Cousins great game if you're looking for one. I'm not trying to play him in DFS, but if Kirk Cousins can connect with Jefferson, 100-yard bonus, maybe a nice little score here, everything is going to check out for this to be that type of game environment for them. 22-point underdogs against Baltimore, who, by the way, Baltimore giving up massive games to another young stud in Jamar Chase. You're not seeing the same exact Marlon Humphrey that you've been seeing, and there's nobody else really back there at this point for Baltimore. I expect a massive game from Justin Jefferson. Let's look at a comparison here. CeeDee Lamb, who I also like, who I think is great in Dallas stacks. He's coming in right now, 7,200, 17.2 point projection. So these guys basically at the same price, same point, right? And CeeDee Lamb is 10% owned to Jefferson, 5% owned. Give me Jefferson all day as a great leverage play. Give me Jefferson all day on Prize Picks, over 71.5 receiving yards. We take that, we smash that, we punch it in the face, we hit it with the uppercut. Shout out Kamaru Usman. I don't know what's going to happen tonight. Shout out whoever else is playing. Rose, Michael Chandler and Gaethje, everything. Billy Q, everything tonight. Lovely card you got coming up on the UFC. But there you go. There you go. A little schmacks to the face of Justin Jefferson's looking like a real solid leverage play this week. Let's finish it up with a wide receiver and a tight end. How about that? Wide receiver and a tight end. Let me know who's your favorite leverage play in the slate. Don't steal mine. Don't just say Justin Jefferson. Don't steal mine now that you know. Let me know who's your favorite play. Whether you got the access to the ownership projections and you got the 3D vision to see the entire slate. Now you got the leverage plays, the optimizer, all that stuff. Whether you're just trying to shoot from the hip. Who's your favorite leverage play in the slate? And don't give me no chalk plays. Don't be telling me that your favorite leverage play in the slate this week's Ezekiel Elliott, right? Or Josh Allen. Don't be telling me that shit. Come on now. Let's try and find a 1% owned flyer. I couldn't find one this week. There's no really good like 1% owned plays. But I found a 2% owned guy for you this week. So the 2% owned flyer play of the week this week, right? 13-point projection on Marvin Jones. And these guys are just if you're playing large field tournaments. Like I'm not trying to play Marvin Jones, to be honest with you, in the 300-person field single entries that I'm going to be playing him in a lot of my buy-ins this week. But if you're playing larger fields, if you're playing with a couple of thousand, what is a larger field? If you're playing in a contest with 3,000 people, that's not the largest of fields, but that's a large field, right? To win first place in a contest of 100 people, that's a 1% chance. 3,000 people, yeah, it's a very minuscule chance. I consider that a large field, personally. And then you compare that to the Million Maker of 200,000 people, yeah, I mean, that's just a lottery system. You're not winning that, right? You're not winning the 3,000 person one, maybe. You're probably not winning that. The 200, 300, yeah, you got a decent chance, relative, right? So, yeah, larger fields, yeah, Marvin Jones, 1-2% flyer is going to give you a lot of leverage. You'll pass more people, so it makes sense to take that risk, right? You're getting a bigger payout because you're passing more people, and you're getting, ideally, if there's more people in there, a higher top prize. So Marvin Jones at 5,700. I put a tweet out. The same price principle that I talk about in my DFS course that I made a couple years back. It's still, I would say, 98 to 99% relevant. There's been some updates if needed. You can check that out. It's down below if you're interested. The DFS course that I made, the same price principle is a thing. It means that when players are at the same price, we talked about this with the running max at 5,300 the other day, or some of the wide receivers maybe at 5,300. But what it says is when guys are the same price, one guy is going to become massively more popular than the other guy because normally the crowd will just fixate to one player in that price range. The other guy then just naturally doesn't look as good because they like the other guy more. So the same price principle, it's a game theory thing. It's just it's a psychology thing. It happens in other areas as well. So you get it here, and it's Marvin Jones and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is the far better play on everything. I have him projected for 2 more points. He fits into more stacks, so it makes sense that he's higher owned. But if you're looking to play Amari Cooper as a one-off in large field tournaments this week, and you are trying to find a leverage play, he is 12% owned. Look at this tweet. Amari Cooper currently 12% owned in my projections on Patreon. Marvin Jones, 2% owned. And there is a projection difference. I have Amari for about 2 more points, but the exact same price, 2 points. You can trade in those 2 points in projection where these guys have somewhat similar ceilings, right? In this offense with CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper's ceiling is around 30. Marvin Jones' ceiling is in the upper 20s. Both of those are going to pay off for you. But if Marvin Jones is doing it at 2%, and Amari Cooper is doing it at 12%, I don't think Amari Cooper, by a 2-point difference, beats Marvin Jones 6 times the times, right? Or 6 times the amount, like this ownership projection is saying. This is saying that the confidence of the field is saying that we believe Amari Cooper will outscore him 6 times as often as Marvin Jones, even though the point projection is only a 2-point difference, even though that's literally a 1 reception difference in the game, right? Even though that's a touchdown difference in the game, it's a massive swing here if it happens to Marvin Jones and not Amari. So this is a nice leverage play, the same price principle, beautiful in the works right here. Marvin Jones over 52.5 receiving yards. I think it's at like 57 on Underdog. So I don't got any Underdog picks for this video. We got some in the other videos, definitely. We'll have some in the live stream. But naturally, if you're looking for overs, Prize Picks is the place to go. If you're looking for unders, which are typically the best bets for props, to be honest with you, right? Typically the best bets for props because injuries can happen in games like we saw with Mike White the other day when we took the under. We can maybe have overconfidence in our abilities to project games, which is another thing. Game flows can go wonky in a 1-game sample, of course. So under is typically a nice way to go, especially for season-long type props, let alone for game by game. But the over 52.5, and these are probably like the most unders I'll take is in this specific video because we're identifying guys who I believe are lower owned, meaning that there's hidden value in them, which naturally means that their props, in my opinion, are probably lower. So Marvin Jones, we like him right there. And by the way, if you're not following me on Twitter, at SalvageDFS, for all the fire tweets, by the way, the fire tweets, at least maybe, who knows, maybe you like them and check it out, at SalvageDFS. I mean, maybe you like them. Let's close it up with a tight end play. And this guy I currently have as a leverage play, but this can look like a big, stupid pick in like a day, right? I'm recording this on Friday afternoon. This could look absolutely terrible by the time this comes out, even Saturday when I update my ownership projections. But right now I have this guy just 5% on because there's so many good value tight ends this week. Dan Arnold's a good value tight end, right? And you have all the top guys in the slate. Waller and Travis Kelce are there. Dallas Goedert is still up there. Mike Gesicki's been steamrolling, right? But there's so many good value tight ends. If Tommy Sweeney plays again with Dawson Knox hand injured, right, which it's leaning that way, you have Dan Arnold on the slate. You still have Jared Cook in stacks or just as a one-off. So there's so many tight ends that are in play that only a couple of them are going to pop up with ownership. And naturally, Darren Waller and naturally Kelce are going to pick up that like 10% ownership. So I currently have with no Noah Fant, Alberto as the best tight end play in the entire slate, and I only have him at 5% on right now. Alberto, to me, the only way I'm hopping off of this guy if he starts to be 15% on. This is an insane freak coming out of the draft. They just took him as like a luxury pick, even though they didn't need him when they already had Noah Fant later in the draft last year, and then he ends up tearing his ACL. And I think he's a great play. I mean, I have him projected for over 10 fantasy points. There's really no comparison to like show the leverage here. The only thing I can say for you is that right now there's no comparisons in his price range because he's a punt tight end, but he's a punt tight end projecting out for 10 fantasy points for me, which is just absolutely insane. Like comparing his projection, 10.5 fantasy points right now, to guys like Dallas Goedert at 12.2. Yeah, Goedert has more fantasy points, but Goedert is also 10% owned, and Goedert is also, $2,000 more, right? Mike Gesicki is $2,300 more, coming in right now with double the ownership, and only, as of right now, 1.4 or 1.5 more point projection. So yet another piece in these Dallas-Denver stacks that's a nice run back for you. I'm probably not stacking Denver at all, but Dallas definitely. So I think that this is a interesting spot for him. And look, it's not the greatest of things. Like Noah Fant's not playing with COVID. That's the reason why you like him here. And this is what he's done so far this season. He's ran 14, 15, 5, 8, and 10 routes. And now one of those games in week 4 where he ran 8 routes, he ended up getting banged up. So you got basically a 3-game sample of him running 14, 15, and 10 routes so far this year. Last week he ran 10 routes, 3 catches, 34 yards in that game. Every single game that he's actually played full this year, he's seen at least 3 targets. He's seen 8.6, 6.4, and 6.4 fantasy points, and that's with him playing as a backup tight end to Noah Fant. That's with Noah Fant running 25 to 30 plus routes a week. So now the expectation is that you take those 15 routes that he's running in these games that he's playing, you bump them up to 25 if they're actually going to trail in this game like Vegas suggests by 9 points, 10 points. Okay, now you get Alberto, who's a matchup problem, especially in the red zone, 28, 30 routes. You start to double all this stuff, and that's where you start to hope that these 8.6, 6.4, 6.4 performances that he's had in his 3 main games start to project out for maybe not the exact double. The efficiency doesn't keep up, but that's why I have him for 10.2 points, 10.4 points. Obvious touchdown upside. Already has 2 red zone targets so far this year. So Alberto looks like a great play, but again, there's a good chance as people start to build those lineups on Friday and Saturday, as more content starts to flush out there in the end of the week, that everybody is going to catch on to this and they, oh, Noah Fant's on the COVID list. Oh, okay, well, Alberto, who's that guy? Oh my God, he's played decent as a backup tight end. Oh my God, look at his athletic measures. I mean, this guy is fucking 258 pounds and runs a 4.5. He runs a 4.5 as a 256'6", right? That is in the top 1 percentile ever for tight ends, ever. And obviously, like, newer tight ends coming out are going to be more athletic than the guys 30 years ago, but still crazy. So I lean the over 8 fantasy points on Prize Picks. You can see that coming up. Again, use the code SAL. Not only do you get the free dollar Rooskies if you use the code SAL up to $100, but you also support the show. You allow me to replace this rotting pumpkin, to replace this dying candle, to replace, maybe you think this shirt is terrible, I think it's great, to get myself a hoodie so I can have even more sunflowers on this body of mine, to keep getting myself the haircuts, and hopefully not the fuck me ups, but the haircuts. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it a ton. Happy weekend. Happy Saturday. You all rock. I'll see you in the next one. Come join the community on Patreon. Come on. We got over 1,000 people over there chopping it up in the Discord, winning the dollar Rooskies. Come on, come on, come on. I appreciate you all. I'll see you when I see you. See you Sunday on the live stream. Be there, or just be a square.